A wee introduction from me, just to get things going. I'm a 60-something Scottish lad from Ayrshire originally. I'm a graduate of Glasgow University in botany of all things, after which I had a career in IT in London, then Aberdeen, then Edinburgh. I left the rat race behind, and we now live in a wee fishing village in the eastern side of Newfoundland, right on the Atlantic shore, and we've got whales, bald eagles, and icebergs for company, and moose in the woods, and bear up in the hills. I write full time now. I didn't choose writing, it chose me. The urge to write is more of a need, really. Same kind of addiction to the one I used to have for cigarettes, and I still got for beer. It's always been there in the background, I think. I wrote short stories at school and dabbled a couple of times over the years after that. But it wasn't until I was in my 30s that it really took hold. That would be back in the very early 90s. I had an idea for a story. I hadn't written much of anything since the mid-70s at school. And I'd been working too hard to be bothered with it. But this idea just wouldn't leave me alone. I had an image in my mind of an old man watching a young woman's ghost. And that grew into a story. That story grew into other stories, and before I knew it, the writing was in charge. So it all started with a wee ghost story, Dancers. It was one that ended up winning a prize in the National Ghost Story competition. It got turned into a wee film. It's been read on several radio stations in the UK, and it's been published in Greek, Spanish, Italian and Hebrew, as far as I know, since up to now. And it got reprinted in the Weekly News, of all things, in Scotland. So not bad for a first story. It made me think things were easier. I soon knew better, of course, but by then it was too late to stop. And since then I've sold over 300 short stories, appeared in many professional magazines and books, and I've had over 30 novels published in the horror and fantasy presses, mainly in the States, and I've got more coming in the next couple of years. I went full time in 2007. Well, I haven't starved yet, so I'm still going. As for the writing itself, the biggest influences on me had to be the writing reading I did as a teenager back in Kilburnie in the early 70s, even before Stephen King and James Herbert came along. I'd been reading Superman and Batman comics as a kid, and then I graduated to paperbacks. Anything I could get my hands on, really. Conan Doyle, Alistair MacLean, Michael Moorcock, Nigel Tranter, Louis D'Amour, they all featured large. Pickings were thin for horror, so there was really only Dennis Wheatley around on the novels side, and the panned books of horror on the short stories side. But sometime in the early 70s I discovered Lovecraft and ghost stories, and things moved on from there. So you mix all that reading in with TV, watching things like Thunderbirds, Doctor Who, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Lost in Space, The Time Tunnel, Star Trek eventually when it came along, and then the BBC moved on to showing Universal Monsters and Hammer Vampires on Friday and Saturday nights. So you can see where the pulpy side of my influences all came from. And there's, of course, there's Quatermass. There's always Quatermass, the mad scientist stuff. For all of that, though, for all the reading I did, most of my work early on in particular was still particularly Scottish. My early series character, the Midnight Eyes, a private investigator in Glasgow, gets involved in the occult and fights monsters. He works in a flat above Byers Road, smokes like a lum, drinks like a chimney. Sorry, drinks like a fish, not a chimney. What a stupid thing to say. I have a lot of fun with him. He appears in 3 books and loads of short stories, and he's still going strong, still writing stories from now 30 years on. More up to date, and I'm currently working on a series of creature features, again featuring Scotsmen. The S Squad series from Sever Press is up to book 16, I've just finished 17, and there's more coming. It's got a team of wee sweary Scottish squaddies fighting big beasties all around the world. If you think about something like Dog Soldiers or Aliens, and but put it through a Ray Harryhausen stop-motion monsters lens, and you'll get a feel for how I think of them anyway. They run in my head like wee films, and I think that's the best way to think of them if you're going to be reading them. So here I am, 30 years on, not quite a horror writer now, I don't think, but somewhat adrift for lack of a label. But I can't exactly say what I am apart from a writer. But as long as there's markets out there for me to put stories in, I'm happy enough with that. And as long as I'm fit enough to keep doing the job, I'm happy with that too. Thanks for listening.